If I were to ask you how many airports does Paris have, you'd probably say two. Most people know about Paris Charles de Gaulle Airport and about Paris Orly Airport. However, some sources claim that there are five airports that serve as the capital of France. When I heard that, I was very surprised. I knew about airlines trying to pretend that Beauvais Airport was a Paris airport, but I was not prepared for an even crazier claim. I mean, airports come in all shapes and sizes, and some are better than others. But one thing I cannot accept is for them to be misleading. Let's learn a little bit about the true Paris airports and the other imposters. Paris is the most visited city in the European Union. Around 50 million people visit the City of Light each year. A big percentage of these people arrive by plane, meaning that the city needs to have enough airport capacity to accommodate all its visitors. There's where Paris Airport comes in. Paris Airport is the organization in charge of operating all of Paris's airports, which include Charles de Gaulle Airport, Orly Airport, and Le Bourget Airport. The last one is usually the least known of the Paris airports, but it is monumental to air travel in Paris. Paris-Le Bourget Airport is located 11 kilometers or 7 miles north of the city and was once the main airport in Paris. The airport was opened in 1919 and serviced international and domestic flights until 1981. Since then, Le Bourget Airport focuses on business aviation only and has been recognized as the Teterboro of Europe. Therefore, the only way to land or depart from Le Bourget is by booking a private jet. Due to its precious location, Le Bourget has become Europe's busiest executive airport, receiving over 55,000 flights per year. Despite its executive airport status, the history of commercial aviation in Paris started at Le Bourget. In 1927, it was the landing point of the famous Spirit of St. Louis, the first solo non-stop transatlantic flight ever. This flight from New York to Paris took 33 hours and 30 minutes. Le Bourget was a trendsetter and allowed for the rise of the other Paris airports. Another fact about Le Bourget is that it has been the house of the Paris Air Show since 1953, an event that continues to be held there on a biannual basis. Even though Le Bourget no longer has commercial traffic, it still remains a pearl in Parisian aviation and a true Paris airport. The second airport to be opened in Paris, and the second busiest one nowadays, is Paris Orly Airport. Orly Airport is located about 13 kilometers or 8 miles south of Paris. The airport dates back from 1918 when it functioned as an airbase, but in 1932 it turned into a commercial airport. It served as a secondary airport to Le Bourget until 1952 when capacity constraints at Le Bourget turned Orly into Paris's main airport. The switch of airports was marked by Air France transferring all of its operations to Orly as this airport had more land to expand. Orly remained Paris's main airport until the construction of Charles de Gaulle Airport in 1974. Now, Orly remains the second busiest airport in France and the busiest French airport for domestic traffic. It is a hub for Air Caribes and Air France, and an operating base for Corsair International, EasyJet, French Bee, La Compagnie, Transavia France, and Vueling. Orly is composed of 4 interconnected terminals. Here is a small breakdown of the terminals. As you can see, domestic flights usually depart from terminals 1 and 2, and international flights usually depart from terminals 3 and 4. Orly Airport is fairly close to Paris. It should only take you about 35 to 40 minutes to get to Paris by car. However, depending on how bad traffic is, it could take you up to more than 1 hour. Most likely you will grab a taxi to Paris rather than driving, but please be careful. Like in many other places, there are taxi scams in all of Paris's airports. These taxi scams consist of someone approaching you with the pretext that they can direct you to the taxi line. These are not official taxi drivers. Once they drive you to your desired location, they will overcharge you like crazy. The best way to recognize an official Paris taxi is to follow these tips from the Paris Airport website, and to only get a taxi from the official taxi ranks listed on the website. As a rule, only take a taxi that you approached in the taxi line, and always ask for a price beforehand. Prices to Paris tend to have a fixed rate, like you can see in this image. For many attractions outside of Paris, here are some estimations. So, if the taxi driver gives you a price that is nowhere close to these estimations, you are probably facing a scammer. Leave and look for an official taxi. In addition to taxis, Uber and other rideshare companies also operate in all of Paris's airports. On average, an Uber drive from Orly to Paris costs 33 euros. Alternatively, you can take the very well-connected Parisian public transport system. There are two options to get to Paris, by metro or by bus. Since the extension of Line 14 all the way to Orly Airport, it has become extremely easy to get to Paris by metro. Before this extension, it will take an extra 10 minutes to get it from Paris to Orly, and at least one transfer. The price has stayed the same, as it costs €13 to ride Line 14. The line has stops at several metro stations between Gare de Lyon and Saint-Lazare station. I have linked the full route map for Line 14 in the description box. Châtelet station is close to the Louvre Museum and is a great station to reach almost anywhere in Paris. I do want to mention that a ticket to from Orly Airport is different than a single ticket for the Paris Metro, and that's the reason for the higher price than a normal metro ticket. A tip I can give you is that if you're spending more than one day in Paris and plan to use public transportation, consider getting the weekly metro card, as that one does include trips to and from Orly and Charles de Gaulle. One-day metro cards do not include either airport, so don't make the mistake of buying the day pass to get to the airports. An all-inclusive weekly metro card costs €31.60, but it is better than having to buy a one-day pass that costs €12 for each day, plus the airport ticket that costs €13. Another public transportation option is to take the bus. Nevertheless, I do want to warn you that buses take the longest to get to Paris, as every single bus takes you to a transit station. This means that by taking the bus, it will take anywhere from 50 to 80 minutes to get to the city center. In my opinion, the Orly bus is the only option worth taking. This bus costs €13 and takes you to Denfert-Rochereau transit station, located in the 14th arrondissement. It takes 30 minutes to reach the transit station and is a great option if and only if you're staying around the 14th arrondissement. Apart from that, the only buses I would recommend are the night buses that run from 12:30 a.m. to 5:30 a.m. In case you arrive or need to get to Orly after 12:30, the buses are your only public transportation option. These buses cost €2.50 and take about an hour to reach either Châtelet or Gare de Lyon. Finally, there is a Disneyland Magical Shuttle for €24 that will take you to Disneyland Paris in about 45 minutes. The de facto Paris airport is the world-renowned Paris Charles de Gaulle Airport. Charles de Gaulle Airport, or CDG Airport, is located 23 kilometers or 14 miles northeast of Paris. It was opened in 1974 and named after the World War II leader and former president of France, Charles de Gaulle. The plan to construct CDG started in 1957, when it became obvious that Orly was going to surpass its capacity by 1975. CDG is in close proximity to Le Bourget, which caused that airport to shift from commercial to business traffic only. With 4 runways, it is the world's 9th busiest airport and Europe's 3rd busiest airport in terms of passenger traffic. Also, is the airport that is served by the greatest amount of airlines at 105 airlines. As France's main airport, it is a hub for Air France and an operating base for EasyJet and North Atlantic Airways. CDG has 3 terminals, although Terminal 2 is subdivided into 7 sub-terminals. Here's a general map of the airport, which doesn't make it less complicated, but a visual reference is always good to have. Charles de Gaulle's layout can be quite confusing, and many people often hate on the airport. However, as long as you are not connecting to another flight, you really shouldn't have any issues. Only prepare yourself for a very busy airport most of the time, so long waits at security or passport control are common. Regardless, all the terminals are connected by the CDG Val, a shuttle train service that runs every 4 minutes from 4 a.m. to 1 a.m. These are the stops CDG Val makes. Plus, there are buses that go around Terminal 2 and stop at each sub-terminal, called N1 and N2 shuttles. Here's the route for N1 shuttle that runs every 10 or 15 minutes, and for N2 shuttle that runs every 5 minutes. CDG is extremely accessible by train due to the 2 train stations at the airport. The first station is located between Terminal 2D and Terminal 3. To reach Station 1 from Terminal 1, you can take the CDG Vol shuttle, and from Terminal 3, you can just walk. This station is only served by the Paris Metro system and the airport's shuttle service. The second station is located underneath Terminals 2CD and 2EF. It is accessible from terminals 2C, 2D, 2E, and 2F by elevators and electric stairs. From Terminal 2A, you can walk or take the N1 shuttle, and from Terminal 2G, you can take the N2 shuttle. There are many signs throughout the airport that point towards the train stations. Going from CDG to Paris and vice versa by train is pretty straightforward, as there is only one option, RERB. The RERB line of the metro stops at both of the airport's train stations, so you can head to whichever is closest or easier to access. The ticket to leave or reach CDG costs €13 and runs every 10 to 15 minutes from 5 a.m. to 12 a.m. I have attached the full route map from RERB in the description box. Yet, the main stations along the route are Paris Gare du Nord, Châtelet-Les-Halles, Saint-Michel-Notre-Dame, Luxembourg, Port-Royal, and Denfert-Rochereau. From CDG, it takes about 25 minutes to get to Gare du Nord, 28 minutes to Châtelet-Les-Halles, and 35 minutes to Denfert-Rochereau. Everything I mentioned about day passes and weekly passes for Orly Airport also applies for CDG. Besides the metro, you can actually take direct high-speed trains to almost every major French city, including Lille, Lyon, Marseille, and Bordeaux. There are several trains that depart daily, so you could very well head anywhere in France after you arrive to CDG. Instead of the train, you can also take the bus to get to Paris. Just like at Orly, there is a shuttle bus called the Roissy bus that costs €13 and drops you off by the Paris Opera. It takes about 60 minutes and runs every 15 minutes from 6 a.m. to 8:45 p.m. and every 20 minutes from 8:45 p.m. to 12:30 a.m. At CDG, you can find stops for Roissy bus at all terminals, except for Terminal 2G. Alternatively, there are city buses that take 70 to 80 minutes and only cost €2. The only asterisk is that they drop you off outside of the city center. Bus 350 drops you off at Porte de la Chapelle, and bus 351 drops you off at Place de la Nation. Unless you are staying around the areas the buses stop at, it might be better to take the metro system. At night, the night buses are the only way to reach Paris from CDG. Bus N143 costs €4.30 and takes you from CDG to Gare de l'Est. The trip takes about 60 minutes and runs from 12 a.m. to 4:30 a.m. Bus N140 is another night bus that follows the same route, but it takes 1 hour and 40 minutes. Finally, there is a special shuttle bus that takes you to Disneyland. The Disneyland Magical Shuttle takes about 45 minutes and costs €24 per adult and €11 per child. To get to Disneyland, there is also a high-speed train, but prices vary. Of course, the most direct way to get to Paris is by driving, as you can get to wherever you want. The drive to the center of Paris takes about 50 minutes, but depending on traffic, it can take up to almost 2 hours. When looking for a taxi, always remember to follow these tips, and always book one from the authorized taxi ranks from the Paris Airport website. In terms of pricing, there are fixed rates depending on which bank of Paris you're going to. The bank refers to the side of the Seine you're heading to. The right bank is the north side, and the left bank is the south side. It costs €56 to get to the right bank and €65 to get to the left bank. Uber is also available from CDG and has an average price of €52 from the airport to Paris. Now it's time to talk about the fake Paris' airports, Paris Beauvais Airport and Paris Vatry Airport. Beauvais Airport is located 50 kilometers or 55 miles north of Paris, not even the same region Paris is in. The airport was opened in 1920 and for most of its time operated as a military airport. It wasn't until Ryanair came in 1997 and created the illusion that Beauvais Airport was a Paris airport that it became what it is nowadays. The airport rebranded to include Paris in its name and draw more attention and traffic to itself. It has clearly worked, and many people fly here because it's a hotspot for low-cost airlines. Airlines that fly there include Ryanair, Wizz Air, and HiSky. I mean, hate on them as much as you want, but Ryanair know how to successfully market an airport. I still think it is not correct to advertise Beauvais Airport as a Paris airport, but oh well. In case you have gotten a very good deal and you're flying into Beauvais, this is how you can get to Paris. To drive from Beauvais to Paris, it is a 1 hour and 30-minute ride. that with traffic can become an over 2-hour drive. Unfortunately, there is no easy public transportation option. The airport has its own shuttle services, but none of them take you to the city center. This is a map of where the airport shuttles drop you off at. As of February 2025, there are 4 shuttle options. One drops you off at Saint-Denis Université, from where you can take Metro Line 13 to reach the city center. The second one drops you off at La Défense, from where you can take the RER lines A and E or line 1 of the Paris Metro. Another one drops you off at La Villette, from where you can take RER line E and Metro line 7. The last shuttle is a seasonal line that takes you to Disneyland Paris. Every single line except for the Disneyland one costs €17 for a one-way and €30 for a round-trip ticket. It is highly recommended to buy tickets online as some lines require it, and you won't be able to buy a ticket upon arrival. Plus, tickets at the airport are slightly more expensive. The other option is to take a bus to Beauvais train station and from there grab the TER to Paris Gare du Nord. The TER from Beauvais to Paris will cost less than the airport shuttle and takes 1 hour and 15 minutes. If you don't mind making your way to the train station with your luggage, then this might be a better option. The other fake Paris airport is Châlons Vatry Airport. If you thought calling Beauvais Airport a Paris airport was outrageous, well, let me tell you about Vatry Airport. Again, another airport that used to be a military base and was repurposed to be a commercial airport in 2000. It is located 147 kilometers or 91 miles to the east of Paris. It is literally in the middle of nowhere, surrounded by fields, and an hour away from the closest city. Although it is unofficially a Paris airport, several Google searches and even its own website call it Paris Vatry Airport or Paris Châlons Airport. Most Parisians don't even know that this airport exists, nor will they ever fly there when returning home. This one is actually insane, and guess who came up with marketing the airport as a Parisian one? Yes, Ryanair. If you go on their website, you can book a flight to Paris that will arrive to Vatry Airport. Fortunately, there are only 2 regular flights to Vatry with Ryanair, one from Marrakesh and another one from Porto. It hurts me to say it, but if you made it to Vatry and need to get to Paris, then this is how to. Drive. Honestly, driving is the only sensible way to get to Paris. It is a 2-hour drive, but it is the best option. If that is not possible, technically you can take a train. The closest direct train to Paris leaves from Châlons-en-Champagne, which is 27 minutes away from the airport. Please just take a taxi there. Otherwise, you will have to get to Vatry and then on a bus to Châlons-en-Champagne train station. The train ride takes a little bit less than 2 hours and arrives at Paris Gare de l'Est. I wanted to make this video to inform people about the false advertisement surrounding some of Paris's airports. Even though none of the airports in this video are inside the limits of the city of Paris, having an airport 2 hours away marketed as an alternative is not right. Sometimes finding a cheap ticket comes with several asterisks that we don't often think about until it's too late. Unless the deal is too good to pass or you have no other option, be mindful of which Paris airport you are flying to. Hopefully, this video gave you a better insight into Paris's airports and other airports around the world. If you have any questions, write them down in the comment section. Consider subscribing and leaving a like. God bless you and have a great day.